well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We are once again going to be revisiting the state of Minnesota here, talking with the Bryan Strawser of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. Governor Tim Walz still hasn't called a special session of the legislature. He keeps talking about it. And in fact, on Tuesday, he and DFL leaders released a proposal for a special session that would start next Monday without the governor actually calling a special session. Top of the list on this proposal, gun bans. Ban on so-called assault weapons, ban on so-called high-capacity magazines, ban on so-called ghost guns, ban on binary triggers, and more legislative efforts. But again, hasn't officially called that special session, which would begin 5 days from now. So I did reach out to Bryan and Rob Dorr from the Gun Owners Caucus last night, and Bryan said that he would be more than happy to spend a few minutes talking with us today. And given, again, what may be coming in just a couple of days, I thought it was important to give folks an update. So great conversation with Bryan. Really glad he could spend a few minutes with us. Take a look and a listen. Bryan, thanks very much for coming back on the program. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you, Cam.
You know, I said in a piece earlier today at Bearing Arms that Minnesota is ground zero right now in the fight over our Second Amendment rights, and I think that's absolutely the case. So we've got a couple of related things to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is a special session. So Governor Walz has said he's going to call a special session. He has not done so. Yesterday, I think it was Everytown for Gun Safety sent out a press release criticizing one of the guy that they endorsed last year as the vice presidential candidate, saying, you need to get on this. I don't know if the two things are related, but a couple hours later, we see this press conference with Governor Walz, the DFL leaders in the House and Senate, saying that they've got a proposal for a special session that would start on Monday of next week, right? So I want to make sure I understand this correctly, Bryan. Governor Walz still hasn't officially called a special session.
He has not called a special session. He's been talking about it for 5 weeks. Hasn't done it.
Okay. So we have this proposal, and I thought it was interesting. It was signed by the DFL leaders in the House and Senate. The Republican Speaker of the House and the Senate Minority Leader, their names were on this document, but they didn't sign it. So is this part of that pressure campaign to get Republicans to go along with gun control?
Yeah. So basically, the governor has been threatening to call a special session for 5 weeks. The governor has been saying for 5 weeks that he was going to release a package of gun control bills. He hasn't. And then comes this document that lays out how the Democrats want a special session to progress. And it starts with a long list of demands related to gun control. And then it mentions mental health and school safety and some other elements of, providing funding to law enforcement and a few other categories. The Democrats' press release they put out on social media actually ignores everything but gun control. It only talks about bans on so-called assault weapons and magazines and binary triggers and ghost guns, and the list goes on from there. Yeah.
So I mean, clearly, again, that's where they're putting all of their weight, right? And Republicans, as I understand, Republicans have introduced their own package for a special session, right? That focuses on school security, focuses on mental health, does not talk about gun control. This has been described as an impasse now, and I guess rightfully so. But there's nothing stopping Walz from saying I'm calling you back in session, right?
The only person in the state that can call a special session is the governor of Minnesota. So if he wants to call the special session, he could have called the special session 5 weeks ago. As I mentioned, he's still not put out his legislative package or any details of that. The Republicans had theirs out within a week, and it focuses on the underlying issues here, which is the lack of school safety funding, particularly for private and parochial schools, the lack of mental health resources here in Minnesota, and other factors related to sentencing and actions being taken by county attorneys here in Minnesota. They had that package out within a week of the Annunciation tragedy. The governor has still not specified, other than saying we should ban assault weapons. What does that do?
And by the way, in this proposal that was released yesterday, okay, so we heard they want bans on so-called assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, bans on binary triggers, expanding the red flag law. What was the other? I seemed like there was one other.
They want to strengthen prohibitions against domestic abusers to ensure they don't have access to firearms. And actually, that issue is not that domestic abusers are allowed to have firearms. It's that law enforcement is not following up on the orders of the courts to remove firearms from these individuals. So it's an enforcement issue more than it is prohibition in law. That's actually already prohibited under state and federal law. Law enforcement just doesn't enforce it. Just like the Star Tribune reported this weekend that law enforcement's not showing up for court on red flag orders when they file petitions.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Oh, they also want to go after quote unquote ghost guns, right? That is the other demand in that their proposal. But again, no specifics, right? So they don't have a bill number. In fact, this proposal says that the bills will apparently be written before the special session. So before Monday, if Walz does end up calling a special session, no amendments will be accepted unless they're accepted unanimously by leadership. Mm-hmm. Doesn't sound like there'd be any public hearings on these bills, right? So we get to find out what the specifics of these proposals. Not that there's any type of gun ban that the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is going to go along with.
Correct.
But again, I mean, the specifics are pretty important, right? If you're saying, well, we want to ban assault weapons, well, how do you define an assault weapon?
Yeah,
I want to know the specifics here.
We don't know. I mean, you know what I know right now.
Yeah.
There were bills introduced during the past session, as there always are, that didn't get a hearing, that had differing approaches to this from in terms of defining an assault weapon. The Senate had working group meetings, which they can't have actual hearings because they're not in session. The Senate had about 6 hours of hearings a couple weeks back. They heard several proposals, including probably the most comprehensive ban on semi-automatic rifles I've ever seen. That still would allow ownership, but you had to register, you had to pay a fee, you had to let the sheriff into your house to inspect them for safe storage every year. You couldn't take them out of your house except to go to a range. I mean, there was all kinds of just crazy crap in there. I don't know if that's what they're proposing, because we've never seen a package on, here's what they think they want to do. Yeah. And this is all political theater, because we know from talking with the Minnesota Senate Democrats, they do not have unanimity across the caucus in terms of passing this legislation. They're not going to have enough votes to get it over the finish line, even if without Republican votes. And in the House, where it's tied, nothing can happen unless the leaders of a committee agree to hear a bill. And no Republican is going to agree to hear any of these gun control proposals in the Minnesota House.
Which brings us to, I think, what is quickly becoming Walz's backup plan. Yep. Right. He has said, well, if we can't get something done in a special session, then maybe we should just bring this to a vote of the people. Let Minnesota voters decide whether or not to enshrine an assault weapon ban in the state constitution.
Yep. Yeah. So we don't have ballot initiatives in Minnesota like California and other states do, but constitutional amendments have to go through a balloting process. In order for that to happen, though, the legislature has to pass the bill. They have to pass the amendment and agree to put it on the ballot. And only then will it go on the ballot. So you've got the same obstacle. But what they're doing here is they're going to use this to provide cover to the 3 or 4 Democrats who have shown reluctance around voting for more gun control by letting them say, hey, I don't want to vote for this, but I agree that we should put it on the ballot. And they're going to use that as cover to get them to vote yes on this bill and get this amendment and get it out of the Senate. That is what this is all about. It is a way to provide political cover for 3 or 4 DFLers that would be in a boatload of trouble if they voted for a gun ban. But they're voting for a gun ban if they vote for this amendment. And
and again, so if that happens, the bill gets out of the Senate, or the proposed amendment gets out of the Senate, goes over to the House, where again Republicans would have to approve it, right?
It's gonna die. I mean, I think the governor maybe thinks, besides providing political cover to the DFL, maybe he thinks that some weak-kneed Republicans, and there are some in the House, might go for this. I think we're going to make it very clear to them that voting for this is voting for the ban. And we would treat it that way, and we would message it that. We're going to message it that way.
Yeah. I mean, this is just... It's disturbing to me that this is, what we're seeing from the governor here, a complete lack of leadership. Not only, I mean, even if I was a gun control activist, like every town, I'd be annoyed at what the governor is doing. But the fact that he is, just embracing this ban our way to safety philosophy, and ignoring, I think it was the Star Tribune, the same paper that did the report on the red flag laws. I think they had a story, might have been the Pioneer Press, but anyways, a couple of weeks ago, talking about the situation for school security. And they were talking to one principal. I don't think she wanted to be named. She certainly didn't want her school to be named because of how bad the security is. Like, there are broken windows. There are doors that won't lock. And she didn't want to go public with this because she didn't want to highlight these security flaws, but they don't have the funds to do basic repairs here to the infrastructure of these schools.
Yes.
How on God's green earth is that not the top priority for Tim Walz, for the DFL majority in the Senate, and frankly for the DFL members in the House? I don't get it.
My wife and I have our children in Catholic school. That's what we thought has been best for them. So I've got a middle schooler and a freshman in high school. Spent 9 years at our parish school and now at one of the better Catholic high schools in the state. We just got the ballot prospectus for a levy for the public school district that we live in that is all about safety and security. Now, part of it was about cybersecurity, and I understand that, the need to upgrade stuff or whatever. But a whole bunch of it was about narrowing the school down to a secured entrance, installing cameras and access control, which I was shocked to find out they don't have. And adding IDs for students and faculty and staff. And I'm like, my kids have always had that at a school that doesn't get any government funding. So how is it, like, where have they been spending their money over the last couple of decades if they're not spending it to keep schools safe? It just boggles my mind that this is the approach that we're taking here in Minnesota.
Absolutely. So, again, we talk about the firewall in the House. We talk about those DFL members of the Senate who are opposed to a gun ban. But again, Walz seems to have a plan for that. Scale of 1 to 10, how concerned should Minnesota gun owners be at the moment, Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're where we were the last time we talked. We need to be concerned about what's going on. It is critically important that we keep pressure on the Minnesota GOP to hold the line in the House and the Senate, particularly the House. And we need to continue to put pressure on the 3 or 4 DFLers that have shown reluctance to advance these bills. And that's Rob Kupek, Grant Housechild, Eric Putnam, and Judy Seeberger, all who won elections by just a few hundred votes in their districts. And they're up for election next year. But we need to get them to continue to hold the line by putting pressure on them to do so.
Yeah. Well, and here's another political reality. I mean, every town was touting their own poll showing, I think, 60% support for a ban on so-called assault weapons. KTSP had a poll, too, showing 53% support, but it was under 50% in every part of the state outside of the Twin Cities, right? That's once you got outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul, majority opposition. So again, if you are a DFL senator representing a rural part of the state, or basically any place other than the Twin Cities, your constituents don't want this gun ban. They don't.
I think the polling was really clear to Republicans that their voting base that elects them do not want these bans. And that's with using the language that every town in KSTP used, which was just, should we ban assault weapons? If I polled the language that's in the bills that we've seen in the past, it's going to be a lot lower than that. If you tell people, hey, you can keep your rifle, all of your semi-automatic rifles, by the way, not just assault weapons, but you have to register it and you have to let your county sheriff inspect your house every year to make sure you're storing it safely. That's not going to be 53%. It's going to be in the tank.
Absolutely. In fact, I wonder, honestly, how many progressives in Minneapolis, St. Paul would say, oh, wait. I'm going to let the police in my house every year. That timeout, that's a bridge too far for me.
Yeah, I just, if you poll what's actually in the bills, I just don't see there being broad base of public support, except for the crazy activist crowd that believes in banning guns. But they're going to vote for they're going to want everything anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question for you. I mean, we're now 5 days away from when Governor Walz says this proposal, calls for a special session to begin next Monday. Do you think we get a special session? Do you think lawmakers will be at the state capitol on Monday?
I think our take on this internally is we're kind of split. I think politically the DFL right now looks petulant, and I think it's becoming more and more obvious to people that are engaging in political theater. I don't think they'll call a special session because they don't have the votes. The other half of our team thinks they will, and Walz will try to use this to cudgel the Republicans, but we also don't think that messaging is going to work. At the end of the day, all of this is political theater. This is really a setup to get messaging for the 2026 election. They know it's not going to pass. They know it's not going to pass in the regular session that starts in February. They want to use this in the 2026 election. And I think that's a fight we would welcome to play our messaging against theirs.
I think you're going to get that opportunity, Bryan. Listen, I appreciate you coming on the program. If the special session does get called, if they're back next week, I'll be reaching out, and hopefully you or Rob can join us on the program. But if folks want more information about what the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is doing, again, you don't have to be a Minnesota resident to join. And you guys you're doing fantastic work there. How do folks get involved?
So best place is to get on our mailing list at gunowners.mn/alerts. That's where we push out our action messaging, or follow us on X and YouTube and Facebook, where we provide more regular updates on what's happening.
Fantastic. Bryan Strawser, chairman of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, thank you again for your time today, and thanks for everything you're doing to keep our segment and rights secure.
Thanks, Cam. Thanks for having me on.
My thanks again to Bryan for joining us on the program. I guess we should be taking bets as to whether or not that special session happens next Monday or not. I'm kind of with Bryan. I think we'll probably see a special session. I don't know that it's going to happen next Monday, because I think this is political theater. And honestly, I think Walz would prefer to wait. There's a special election for a state Senate seat. There might actually be two, but I know that there's at least one. But that's not going to be held until November. And I thought that the regular session began in January, but Bryan mentioned that it starts in February. So my prediction would be that Walz would prefer to wait until after that special election is over, give the DFL majority at least one more member who would be inclined to vote for all of these gun control proposals, quite frankly. But again, he's getting pressure from the gun control lobby to call a special session now. And Walz, who is running for a third term as governor, he needs their support. He needs their money. So whether or not he is willing to buck the demands of Moms Demand Action and Every Day for Gun Safety, that remains to be seen. Well, I think we will see a special session. The question now is, will it be sooner rather than later? All right, on to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day and our recidivist report. We will start there with a story out of CWB Chicago. Facebook Marketplace robber who escaped by running into police station lobby gets probation. Now, I would say, this is an example of a dumb criminal, but maybe he was pretty savvy if that helped him get probation. 24-year-old Philip Shockley ended up pleading guilty to one count of robbery in exchange for a 24-month probationary term handed down by Cook County Judge Carol Howard. CWB Chicago reports that the judge also ordered him to perform 45 hours of community service, get his GED, and demonstrate a, quote, good faith effort at maintaining his employment. Now, the robbery attempt occurred back on February the 6th when Shockley had arranged to buy a luxury watch from a 19-year-old through Facebook Marketplace. The meeting spot was the parking lot of the Austin District Police Station, which is that's smart, right? I've offered that advice here before. Listen, if you're meeting up with somebody, there's going to be an exchange of cash for goods. Do it in a police station parking lot. In this case, didn't really help. As soon as the seller showed him the watch, according to prosecutor, Shockley shoved the seller twice, struck a fighting pose, reached towards his waistband like he had a gun. The victim then shouted for help, which CWB Chicago reports was close at hand since he was standing in the police station parking lot. Instead of running down the street or getting into his car and driving away, Shockley instead sprinted into the police station's front door, where he was quickly taken into custody. When a sergeant noticed a, quote, suspicious bulge in Shockley's underwear during lockup, he asked Shockley to remove it. It was another luxury watch. I don't know where he got it. Anyway, according to CWB Chicago, court records show that Shockley previously completed probation successfully for a 2019 theft case. So this is not his first run-in with the law. Hopefully it's his last. But again, 2 years of probation, which is what he received, by the way, for the theft case back in 2019 as well. So there you go. Today's armed citizen story from Fort Myers, Florida. Now, we really don't have any information at all about the circumstances of the shooting. What is interesting, though, is that this is the city's fourth self-defense homicide this year. Remember, not all homicides are criminal acts. They're not all murder. This is a justified homicide. And according to the local press there, or according to the Fort Myers Police Department, 2/3 of the homicides in Fort Myers have in fact been deemed acts of self-defense this year. Now that's, again, I think good news, although I'm sure gun control activists would bemoan this, saying that, things like stand your ground, castle doctrine, legalize murder, as opposed to, allow folks, again, to act in self-defense. Again, we don't know much about the circumstances of this case. It happened back on September 26th. There was a shooting in the 700 block of Duffy Street. Officers arrived on the scene about 9:48 that evening, and they ruled that this was a case of self-defense about 3 days later. Authorities have not released the names of those involved, including the individual who passed away. But again, of the 6 homicides in Fort Myers, Florida this year, 4 of them have been deemed self-defense. I think that is definitely worth noting. Finally, today, our good deed of the day. In the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A gentleman in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Christian Eggleston, says he was lying in his bed a couple days ago when his neighbor's house caught on fire about 4:30. This was last Wednesday morning. He said the smell of smoke actually prompted him to look out the window. And when he did, that's when he noticed the flames. He could see them coming through the trees between his property and his neighbor's property. So the first thing Eggleston did was call 911. And then he ran over to his neighbor's home. He found one of the homeowners outside, but she said her husband was still inside the structure. And Eggleston said, I threw my shirt over my face. I couldn't breathe. He said, I couldn't see anything, but I could hear the guy yelling. He said, and then I had to get out. He said he didn't know the couple that well, but he didn't think twice about running into the burning home. He said they're neighbors. But he said that not being able to rescue the man, he says just hearing his voice, not being able to do anything, he says is all I've heard for the past 2 hours is his yells. Thankfully, the individual was extricated from the home by firefighters who, again, had breathing apparatuses, were far better equipped to run into that burning building than Mr. Eggleston was. He was taken to a hospital. At last report, he is in critical condition. But, I know that Christian Eggleston wishes that he could have done more. The fact, though, that he was willing to put his own life on the line for somebody in need, somebody he didn't know well, just knew that they were in trouble, speaks volumes about Christian Eggleston's character. And so, I hope that he's able to, provide comfort to the neighbor who's not hospitalized while her husband is recovering. I hope that he's able to visit that gentleman. And obviously, we hope that the individual in question does make a speedy recovery. But Christian Eggleston, you were still in the right place at the right time. and you were still willing and able to do the right thing. And that deserves a tip of the hat. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. Looking forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. By the way, I did hear from several of you yesterday, just, talking about your own dogs, wishing me well. So for those who care, basically she's on palliative care right now. There's not much we can do. I'm just going to make sure that her remaining days are as good as possible, and that she is not in a position to suffer. And when her quality of life gets to the point that, it is time to say goodbye, then we're going to do that, as painful as that might be. It could be a couple of days from now. It could be a couple of weeks from now. If, knock on wood, a miracle happens, maybe we've got a couple of months. But anyway, that's the update. And I do appreciate you thinking about us and thinking about her. And I really appreciate y'all talking about, your own pets and how important they are to you. I'm not one of those people. I don't refer to my dogs as fur babies. I don't know. No shade to anybody who does. But like I said, this pup has been with me for 8 years. We share the same birthday. She was, she's been a big part of my life. And yeah, it's going to be tough, but we're going to make sure that her last days are as good as possible. So, all right, we will be back tomorrow. Until then, be sure to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day today. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Even with the government shutdown in effect, we may be getting some court decisions because the courts are still functioning as possible, or as, I guess as good as they always do. Still have a lot of legislative news, including maybe more news out of Minnesota. If you like what you see at BearingArms.com, I'd encourage you to become a VIP Gold, or VIP Platinum member. Just use the promo code FIGHT, and you can get 60% off your membership. We certainly do appreciate your support. All right, until we talk again, be well, be safe, and be free.